So with the Spur Change team, Catherine, Nico, and myself, the three of us have been working on this course with instructional designers, so people who have been designing the course. This was done in a collaboration with the OctoD firm and the Bastel firm. This is a 3-hour course that is self-directed and that's available for the PMOs and also adapted to the needs of the small and medium-sized organizations. So why did we decide to develop this course or a new course on result-based management? Well, first, the principles that guided us and the choices we made about the design of the course. First is that in spite of the fact that there are so many tools, resources, and training available on RBM, still, this is one of the most important requests we receive from the organizations. And when we did our survey at the beginning of our program, RBM was identified as one of the priority needs for the organization. So we asked ourselves, how can this be? There are so many resources available, even at Global Affairs Canada. So how could we develop something that would be different from the existing resources? So it's in this context that we decided to develop a self-directed course that's using the creative elements that we will be introducing to you today. Something else that we wanted to take into account is the diversity of the sector and the diversity of levels and needs of the small and medium-sized organizations. So we wanted to give the SMOs that have no experience whatsoever in RBM to use this introductory course that can be followed individually and can be shared with your partners internationally or with the volunteers before taking a more advanced course. And then we'll provide a course that will be RBM 201. So when people will follow this second level course, they will have been introduced to the basics of RBM and will have had an opportunity to test how to develop fine indicators. The idea was to help them uh, put that in practice and bring RBM to life using the tools for RBM. So we developed that 3-hour course that's self-directed for level 1, and then it will be compulsory for or mandatory for those who would like to follow the RBM 201 to have taken this RBM 101. So I wanted to tease you with the visual and the creative elements that were selected. So Catherine, we'll listen to you now.
Interplanetary Live is proud to have two representatives from the Peace and Play for an exclusive live intergalactic interview. Welcome, Nerva and Grammy. Thank you. On behalf of our audience of small or medium-sized Canadian organizations and their partners all around our planet Earth for accepting our request for an interview. As you know, your story of how you used results-based management, RBM, to develop a cloud-based play space to promote peace and cooperation in your world is now hitting the headlines on Earth. We're thrilled to see you collaborating with the Spur Change team to share your experiences through a new online course for our listeners and viewers.
It's an honor to talk to you and help people working in your world's development programs accomplish big things too. We're so happy with the impact we've made. We want to share our experience with as many creatures of the universe as we can, wherever they are.
Have you seen our play space? It's so cool.
Yes, we were impressed. You were able to communicate very clearly what you achieved. Is that another benefit of taking the RBM approach?
Absolutely. It allowed us to describe very clearly why we are doing a pilot for a play space, exactly what we wanted to achieve, and how we aim to get there. It's a big benefit to be able to articulate that, especially when you want to find donors.
We can see you here at work, planning your project. Would you say it was an easy process?
It was hard. I wanted us to talk about
That's right. RBM is not intuitive.
We have a message from Zima from Planet Your Globe. Here's what Zima says. RBM is not intuitive and forces us to be more professional, to look beyond the tips of our own noses. Intuitively, when we face a challenge, we ask ourselves what we want to do about it, and we don't really explore the problem itself or the real impact we want to have. With RBM, we take a step back and think impact before activities. Impact is really crucial in our line of work, but still gets overlooked sometimes in our rush to solve problems with projects. Once you master this impact-first approach, RBM will make your work easier.
think impact before activities. We heard that so much.
Yes, Croja and I, we did hammer that in, but it's so helpful. RBM makes us feel that our efforts are always aligned with the results we define together.
In reports of your success, you are often quoted saying, "We did that together." Can you elaborate?
Croja and Prammy, they always say that we share everything with everybody.
So true, Narva. One of the biggest strengths of RBM is the fact that it helps us work together as a team and with all our stakeholders. We all know where we are going, why and how we plan to get there, and this shared information builds trust.
Justo from Novi2 agrees with you, saying that while we work more collaboratively with RBM, the process also gives us more independence and flexibility. We don't have to explain every little change we're making to our projects. Thanks to the work we've done together with RBM, our sponsors trust us to take care of the implementation of the strategy we agreed on to get the results we want.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Could you imagine achieving your interworld renowned success without the RBM approach?
Not at all. I've worked without RBM and wasted so much time. With RBM, we know where we are going, we track our progress, we make adjustments when we need to, we tell our stories. I wouldn't approach a problem any other way.
You said once that with RBM, we can clearly determine the positive impacts the activities are having, and we can see the possible negative ones as well.
Yes, it's terrible when you think about it, right? Because we're all in this field to help make a difference. Without RBM, you don't know the impact you're making, because you most likely haven't created the framework you need to properly measure it.
And you can't tell others about it.
Ah, yes. Narva helped a lot with our reports and communications. Being able to talk about our project, tell our story, and show the results that we know are directly linked to the activities we implemented, that's key.
Let's talk about the online course you helped develop and starred in. Are you confident it's going to help our small and medium organizations?
Yes, it's been carefully designed so that by the end of the course, you love RBM and you can't wait to apply your new learnings to your projects. And it's not just us that are featured in the course. By the way, other RBM experts were consulted, and you'll find all the essential core RBM knowledge in there.
I did the course myself. It was fun, and I learned heaps.
The course is really straightforward, purposeful, and clear. It takes you step by step through the RBM methodology and tools, and it's very practical too. There are opportunities for real-world practice with a lot of case studies and examples that test and reinforce your learning.
Having done the course myself, I can tell you Earthians out there listening, it's well worth the time and effort. I encourage you to give this unique course a go. Share it with as many people as possible and make lasting impacts. We can't wait to interview the next award-winning change makers on our show. Thanks, Prammy and Narva, for coming to Earth today. And thanks also to Zima and Justo for sharing your insights. Bye for now.
Thanks, Catherine, for showing us a really insightful video of what RBM is for the course and how we've managed to gone through months and months of very intricate details, as you can see from that video. So for those of you here in the call that do not know me, I'm just gonna introduce myself quickly. I'm Nico, I'm the Learning Content Designer at Spur. And for the next 3 slides, I'm just gonna talk about very briefly as to 3 main points that we thought that were crucial and important in the design and sort of in the initial design components, development, as well as the execution. So one of them, as you can see, is the really storytelling that you got from the video. And the storytelling is really towards how can we bring a narrative that carries a common theme through the entire module, but it also helps us tie everything together, right? Everything that we know currently about RBM, things that perhaps we've heard from folks that, you know, sometimes certain RBM courses elsewhere do not work. So this was sort of the why we're doing things. And it helps really learners in this sense, especially adult learners like yourself, to make sense of the content by providing a new perspective, a narrative that allows them to get deeper into the details. So certain key elements that we consider are important was during the creation process was really using a gender-based language and diversity, which reflected within the narrative arc as well as with the visuals. And we went through a series of consultations with committees and folks who have used this in the past, really to get into, you know, does this make sense for folks? Is it relevant and accessible enough, right? And we'll talk about this in a few minutes. So a lot of these considerations also take into the roles, right? We had a conversation about like, as an SMO, as a small medium-sized organization, depending on your organization team, some organizations are very small, one person, right? So you may have multiple hats, and you know, sometimes we do have multiple hats in organizations. So really defining the role into the narrative was also very important because it really speaks to a lot of our work. The second part it was science fiction, right? And this was very fun because with the team Octo-D, which, you know, they're the experts in a lot of these, and hats off to them. As part of this narrative, we wanted to find a balance between making RBM as practical, yet as far from reality as from other RBM courses. So it was very, very hard because we wanted to, the proposal was, you know, how do we make a new world that people understand? You know, this is interactive. There's some elements of gamification and so forth, but at the same time, it's real enough so that they can put it in their own practice, right? So it's a fine balance of making sure that it's relevant, yet it's fun and engaging, that you engage with the content in a very, I would say, direct way. And as we know, maybe from your work, we're always on the go, right? So we have short time, you know, we only have a span of like maybe a few minutes. And this was sort of another element that we wanted to tackle, right? How do we make it into a piecemeal format? So as you can see in the screen, it's you're going through different levels, right? Different levels of information. Some of you have had definitely more knowledge into RBM, and we've seen that. Others are just, you know, starting. So we wanted to have different worlds where you can jump in and see, kind of get into the details of what you really needed. And then the science fiction theme also came into play, which allowed us to avoid using sector examples, but more, I would say, creative and artistic. So potentially alienating college or creating stereotypical scenarios. So this one in itself, we create, like the Octo-D team really allows us to think beyond on providing a new world, right? So this is the world of peace and play that you're hoping to achieve certain progress, and then you can reflect that even into your own work. And last but not least, the gamification elements that I think are relevant and, again, important, not just for the use, but more towards the feedback. And the feedback that is really aligned to elements of self-learning. So things, you're taking the time to be able to actually go through this course, but at the same time, you're having your own feedback as to whether or not you're validating that information and knowledge. So the use of gamification is really meant both as an engaging tool, but to prompt behavior responses that really test your knowledge, allow this interactivity, and maybe even competition, which are really elements of game playing. And the other part is really just taking it back to adult learning, right? As adult learners, some of the game-based mechanics and aesthetics really plays into our, I would say, you know, maybe even early childhood years. So this really comes into game thinking, engaging, moving pieces around, clicking and seeing surprising elements of like pop-up screens. So these are a lot of the language that we've already used in our past experiences. So this is friendly language to our way of learning in that sense. So certain parameters had to be put in place, such as you can see in the screenshot, validating information, right? Weak or strong, but then if you have it wrong, then you have a pop-up screen that would allow you to actually get the right information. Others is just maybe connecting certain elements, you know, piecing together puzzles, having that information ready. So these three main components of storytelling, science fiction, and gamification came all to be almost a certain criteria, really putting us in your shoes as an SMO. Is me as an SMO, what am I really getting out of this, right? And how am I actually going to transmit this type of information to my colleagues, to my partners internationally, right? Are they going to get it right? Am I going to be able to have some discussion, right? So these are a lot of the questions that we really grappled for many months. So I just wanted to leave it there, and we're going to talk about how this became more of like an inclusive conversation.
Thank you, Nico. And before I jumped into the inclusive design, I just want to say that, and I want to acknowledge that the decision around the gamification, the science fiction, the narrative arc, I must say that we have been pushed a little bit further by Oak 2D, because I think in the sector, we're not necessarily used to this kind of visual, this kind of gamification in our training and in our learning space. So I really appreciate working with Maria and Hélène from Oak 2D, who are coming from not from the sector, so who could bring their expertise into this course. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of these ideas were coming from them, and they kind of convinced us that this is what we needed to provide a different course and a creative course for SMOs. So about the inclusive design, so from the beginning, when we started working on this, it was last summer when we started working on the course. And from the beginning, we created an advisory committee. So small and medium organization from across the country, Francophone, Anglophone, even partner organization outside Canada participated in a needs analysis at the beginning, and then they were part of the development phase. At each phase, we were consulting this small advisory group. They were providing feedback, insight. They also tested the course at the beginning of January to make sure that the design, the different gamification, the exercise were working for them, and that it was appropriate on their based on their work. But we also consulted different organizations who could provide insight on the vocabulary that we were using, for example, related to gender or to different inclusivity matters. So one of the first, and maybe the first priority for us was around gender, to make sure that we will include gender equality throughout the course. So the conceptual notion of gender, what does it mean? What are gender transformative? What is gender blind? But also how does this apply to RBM? For example, what does a gender blind indicator look like in comparison to one that is gender transformative, for example? So our exercise allow participants to see the differences and to see to compare between including gender and not including gender in your design. So we also wanted to make sure that we will use accessibility feature for people who are visually impaired or people who have hearing impairment. So we, for example, provided transcript to the course. So this is available for each screen, but we also make sure that the course will be compatible with different reading software, such as JAW, for example. So we also tested the course with participants who are visually impaired to make sure that we will improve the format that we are using. And we did a lot of work with Maria on this. So thank you again, Maria, for all the research that you did to make sure that the course was inclusive. But we also wanted it to be inclusive in terms of representation. So the visual that we were using, the image, the different characters that is part of the piece and play. So there were a lot of conversation happening within the team to make sure that this will be as inclusive as possible. And I would like to thank all those who participated in the advisory committee from the beginning in September until very recently in the past few days and weeks to provide their insight and their expertise. Okay, so I think we are now ready to move to the next portion where we will actually be having a conversation with our course developers.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for that, Andriane. Yes, I have the wonderful pleasure of introducing the fabulous OctoD team, Maria and Hélène. Do you want to just open up your mics and tell us a little bit about your position at OctoD and what do you do there?
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Maria. I'm the founder of OctoD. Been working within the online training field since 2013. But before that, I used to coach or do regular live training too. In my different work, I've been working in the field of culture, well, the cultural field. Oh, I think maybe in French.
Oui.
Oui, I should answer. Oui, je vais continuer en français. Donc, j'ai travaillé dans le milieu culturel.
So I'll continue in French. I've been working in the cultural
Et puis,
milieu
aussi dans le milieu
and also
dans le
in the
passé.
community, in community organizations in the past. And those are topics that are of great interest for me. So working with Spur Change was a really big advantage for us. Looking at the spirit of the team was also quite extraordinary because not everyone is open to this kind of training that is somewhat outside of the usual. We're also working with corporations and organizations not for profit like the Red Cross, but it's not every day that we can afford to have fun as we had with Spur. And also my role in the organization is more at the artistic level. So I'm involved in the artistic creation of the course. So the pictures that you saw are coming from my brain in a way.
From Hélène, she's having a little bit of trouble with her video. Can you speak with us, Hélène?
Oui, bonjour. Je sais pas pourquoi ma
Yes,
vidéo
I'm still there, but all of a sudden my video stopped working. It never happened. It had to be today, of course. But so I'm sorry. So it will probably be working. So I'm the e-learning designer for OctoD, and I've been working for some 20 years in this kind of effort. So to create like
Want to tell us a little bit more about what your role is in some of the different projects that OctoD takes on?
Ah, d'accord. Mon rôle en tant que
See,
conceptrice
my
pédagogique,
role as instructional designer is to work with experts, so I'm very seldom an expert myself on the topics that we are dealing with. My role is to go and tease the experts to become an expert as well in a very short time, to be able to translate their knowledge into something that would be available and accessible for our target audience. So I have also to review the target audience, their features in terms of education, or so we have developed research on that, and then we are translating the knowledge by applying neuroscience principles. So we know what will help people to learn easier. We know that storytelling is a critical element, that gamification is also an element, that also making feedback possible is also important, so that people would make mistakes precisely so that they can draw the lessons from their own mistakes. So I have to apply all of that, and we are mixing all those elements, and I'm working closely with production so that the pictures convey really what we want to bring in terms of concepts. So if we want to be gender inclusive, so it means that the characters will be representative, that will not be gendered, and that's why they were in a different world, so that they can speak to everybody. So it's not identified to a specific sector, so that people will say, no, it's not like that in my place or in my sector. So it wants to be broad enough to respond to the needs of the largest possible numbers. And we're trying to provide a unique experience that will be understandable by the largest number.
Thank you for that, Helen. So I'm sure many of our participants, like me, didn't grow up with video gaming at all. But I have to say that one of the things that I really enjoyed once I started working with OctoD and this particular course is the animation. And because I did grow up watching cartoons, and I was sort of immediately taken by the characters. They were all very fun and intelligent, and I really enjoyed how you had brought the animation to life. So Maria, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that process. How do you get from 0 to what we see today?
That's actually my favorite part of the work. Just have a white, d'avoir une feuille de papier blanc.
To have a white piece of white paper and from zero to start from scratch. I think I really love doing that. And the how, it's a collaboration, close collaboration with Hélène. In other cases, sometimes we ask people to develop something. So it's almost like the art industry. We start with stories and we storyboards because of the interactivity. But beyond that, there's the whole dimension of inclusivity, inclusion, that we have to represent everybody. So it was a lot of work, but it was for an enormous learning experience for me. So I want to make sure that we don't use normal people, as we say, but they have to be normal at the same time. Of course, we're not in films. We don't where we have 3 or 4 years to develop an imagery. No, based on what exists already, and that we try to create personalities. We had to play with colors, play a lot with the colors, with the clothes. I have discussions with Hélène, with Andrea and Catherine, and even we change things sometimes. When I looked at the isles, we changed the islands at the same time, or the iconography also. I think for us, so I raved with ideas that it was really a result of a group work, and the that we worked together. I I had a lot of video games when I was growing up, so I knew a lot of this stuff, and I got inspiration from that in the progression of the different parts of the game. So this was something that was really fun to produce.
but it's not fast, is it, Maria? From start to finish, like maybe COVID slowed us down a little bit. I don't know from your side, but if somebody was going to take this on, what would you say is the estimated time frame to get this kind of a course up? Because I'm sure many are interested.
Dans notre cas,
in our case, we took about 6 months, I believe, from zero to these results. For English, it was done in 4 months. Then we had to produce a second language. Yeah, so 4 months. We took 2 months more. There were a lot of adjustments to make. It also depends on the course. It depends on the topic. Sometimes the topics are more complicated. This one here is rather complex. So the topic, but also there are considerations to add. That's why we have to have the decisions made, with changes and things like that. It's very normal, but sometimes there are many changes, and so that really extends the course. From the beginning, the pandemic certainly had a certain impact, not only in the production but on the availability of people. Sometimes so thanks goodness before the pandemic, we worked in a virtual manner. So for us, this didn't touch us as much because I know for some people in certain organizations it could be it could double time. But when we decided not to use the real videos, that we weren't depending on actually face-to-face meetings with people.
I do want to be cognizant of the time here so that we have time for an open Q&A, but I do want to look at one more aspect of this. And this is a part that you and I did quite a bit of back and forth, and Andrian and Nico might had a good start on this before he left away for paternity leave. But tell us a little bit about the technical side of making this accessible. It's particularly for people that are visually impaired, deaf, or hard of hearing. What goes into that? Because more and more this is becoming part of the sector to make online material that is accessible. But what does that really mean from a technical side?
Du côté technique, il y a des choses qui
Technically, there are things that are basic, such as the things there are things that were easy to manage. What's more difficult is the visual, especially for this kind of course, because it's a lot more complex. There are a lot of PowerPoint presentations with text and photos. I would say it's much easier to make it accessible. But when we work with stuff that's film stuff or YouTube or whatever, then I would say that's the equivalence or the balance between those who don't have any admissibility difficulties, and sometimes we try to make things a bit more visual. We could do everything we did with visual, and the same thing to allow people have a balance between the non the people who don't have as many difficulties and those who do. So then there's the audio. You see big text, and if there are text, there's a lot of things that. So we did a lot of text with bigger text, as I say, and with the capacity to change the text. So it was a whole lesson for us. But in a learning process, we were able to do this, to sit down with a person who had vision problems, for example, and to work through this with other special consultants in this visual field or the hearing field.
And was that really an important part to be able to have that back and forth with a real user? Because did you find that there were improvements that you made after that back and forth?
C'est sûr qu'il y a eu des.
Yeah, of course, there were changes that we did because there's a lot of things, if we know ideas about certain fields, there are things that to us are evident, but if I remember the course even closing my eyes, but we need to have. It's been years that I've been doing this kind of work, so I know the principles. We have to just, but it was very important for us, for people who don't have accessibility problems. In the very first course, they see all the same thing. So on the welcoming page, you'll see for people who have accessibility problems, there are instructions, special instructions that are there because it's maybe the first time they're going to work in a module. I think it's very rare that in Canada, that even in general, to have modules of advanced level that has the dimensions of accessibility to them, not just text, but vision and things like that. So we had to decide the order in which the person will get involved with chaque element, with each element, and so that's a lot of work for us. But how to translate this in another language was not self-evident.
Myself, thank you so much, Maria and Helen. Thank you for that technical overview. I think we're going to open this up to our audience. I'm sure they must have a few questions that they'd be willing to share with us, and obviously the Q&A could be directed at anyone here on the team or OctoD. So, Nico.
Yeah, so I welcome folks. If you have any questions, please add it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whatever you feel more comfortable. So we're just going to track them here.
En attendant, Nico, donc les gens se
Waiting, Nico, people to intervene. I'd like to add that we worked. It really was a work with 3 teams, I would almost say. Presently, you're hearing the OXOD and to Spur, but the other the group Barcel. We worked with the group Barcel on the GAR. They're specialists in gender questions. I'm part of their team, so it really is the team that provided and validated the content that we used, even if the wealth of all information. So the examples that are there that we can find in the projects are, so even if the storytelling and the science fiction uses an organization that's fictitious, the cases that are included and the examples that are used and the indicators are real life examples at the international development level. And this is provided to us by the Bastel Group. Well, we don't seem to have any questions. Oh, Kimberly's writing us now in the chat. J'ai hâte.
We'll do it this month before reporting, and I'm just so inspired by the work of the Spur team and the content in the sessions I've been in. Merci beaucoup, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Question from Leah.
Creating this course that you think you will apply to future courses you create in other sectors for OctoD.
Je pense que on a la chance.
Well, I think that we learn every day. I mean, we have a chance to working in this kind of field. We're learning, they say a lot of stuff. And in this case, there's the challenge of accessibility, for example. That was very important for us. We could use our past experience in a way, but we learned a whole lot of things because we went further than we had a high level course, and we had a lot of film and activities that were a bit more futuristic, and so I learned a lot about how to use these tools, and I can say after having had the experience. It was used very, very useful. Even today, last week, for example, we have another project they're working on where we had a discussion and they said, this is not necessary at the end of the project. They said, and finally, no, we changed our opinion with new requirements. So I think that the greatest learning is mostly in business. And from the outset, as much as we can, we try to have these discussions to put things, make things clear, how we're dealing with this, and we ask. We know it's very important when people look at the course and to see the experience that we have people who have handicaps or deficiencies. Thank you, Maria. So maybe we have time for one question or a last comment. We have about 2 minutes left before having to leave this hall to come back in 15 minutes when the next session will start. So if there is a question, don't hesitate. Otherwise, I'll encourage you to take the course. We'll share this in the chat. We'll give you the link in Padlet also. And therefore, if you haven't in the Spur letter, I invite you to go to that letter. We get all kinds of information on the course and the different activities for the Spur. So don't hesitate to follow us. We already have 40 people, as I said in the chat. If we start the course, many people have completed the course. So we're very happy for this, to see that some people of one organization complete their course, and then we see a whole bunch of other people of the same organization that pick it up. And that's great. So I see a comment from Norma. Est-ce que c'est possible d'avoir...
Learners can know which section to revisit to achieve the learning objective of knowing as much.
Je peux répondre là-dessus, c'est Hélène. Oui, c'est le cas, c'est ce qu'on a.
Yes, that's what we've done. We have a module for that at the end. So we guide you towards other modules that you can learn from what people have achieved.
Voir donc le détail des réponses dans l'évaluation. Donc, vous ne pouvez pas voir exactement où vous avez fait les erreurs. Mais en effet, vous pouvez voir dans quel module sont vos faiblesses.
Exact.
Oui, ça donne la chance de réessayer.
It gives us a chance to try and to remember. So we try not just to have memory in responding to the questions.
Everyone, thanks for joining this informal session. Thanks, of course, Hélène and Maria and the Autodit team for your work and for the great collaboration with you over the past few months. Thanks also to Le Groupe Bastel, who worked as well on this course. I would also like to thank all those who participated in the advisory group from the beginning, who participated in the need assessment, who tested the course before launching it, who provided insight on gender, sexual diversity issues, and all of that, the language and the representation and the accessibility features. So there were a lot of people behind the development of this course, and we are really looking forward for you to take the course, complete it, and give us your feedback via the assessment.